enough for a Monday. We got our recording on, so thank you all for joining us today. This is actually now our 5th demo that we have done from supply chain, showcasing some of the procure-to-pay modules and activities and tools within the Oracle Aggie Enterprise solution. For those of you that have come before, bear with me for a moment as I do a little preamble for any of the new visitors we have today, and those that have been here, just a reminder for you as well. A few things for some housekeeping, and then we will kick it off. First off, this presentation that you're going to see today, this is not training. This is just sort of a demo / showcase with an opportunity for some Q&A. So you don't need to take notes. You don't need to feel like you have to learn how to use the system. We are trying to just normalize and socialize what this new system looks like for everybody so that we aren't all surprised together come January. We will be recording this. We'll have it posted up on our website shortly after the end of the presentation. You will probably see from some of our team members that do demos that they may have some more access than you will eventually have, or possibly vice versa, in our Aggie Enterprise solution. That's always normal in a test environment. So you may see things that you won't get at the end of the day. As you may know if you've been here before, but our goal here is to have everybody come back every month, and we do rotate through different agenda topics and different areas of the system to showcase and to dig into and to provide a little Q&A on. So if this is your first time, please don't feel like this is a one and done. We really do want to have you come back again every month until we go live to continue to get familiar with the system and let us know what's working and what's not working and how we can change things within the bounds that we can. Last reminder, we don't own or manage the chart of accounts. So if you were hoping to dig in with some Q&A on how poet strings will work, you went to the wrong meeting. Please go easy on everybody here. We're all on the same team. We're all trying to do this together. Our goal within supply chain is really just to get this out in front of everybody on campus as early and as often as possible. We recognize that there are differences in how we process things in Oracle. There are limitations. There are some advantages, but we know that we can't change all those things. And the best that we can do is make sure that everybody knows about them and isn't surprised when they come along. So we will go through, I think, about 3 main areas today. We're going to be looking at the supplier services, so sort of the onboarding of suppliers and how to basically the questions that we'll be asking of new suppliers. We will take a look at the online pre-purchasing system integration into the requisition module of Oracle. So that's going to be pretty exciting to see one of our boundary apps in play. And then also talk about how to reassign requisitions, which is a possible solution for one of the pieces of functionality we're actually going to lose, which is the window shopper that we have in Aggie Buy today. So there is a workaround. We'll talk through that one with you all. And then we'll get into some of the search functionality around AP. So really what is important to most of you, which is how do you find out the status of your invoices? How do you find out the status of supplier payments? And then we'll plug our survey on our website for you at the end. Now, throughout all of these things, if you have questions during the demonstrations, please feel free to throw them into chat. The team and myself will do our best to answer them all in real time. But then at the end of each module, we'll pause and everybody can come off mute if you want, and you can ask some questions and answers. We'll spend a little bit of time at the end of each session with some verbal communication. But throughout the whole thing, feel free to use chat. We're happy to get in there and respond back. So with all of that, thanks again for coming. I'm going to hand the baton over to Andina on our supplier services desk, and she'll dive right in.
Hello, everybody. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, and Crystal, you need to enable. All right. All right. Oops. There we go. All right, so first up, I'm going to show you how to search for a supplier. And then, like Mike said, I'm going to show you how to add a new supplier. We've updated our questionnaire, which is going to be a really important part of adding a supplier. So we'll spend some time there. So you're going to hit suppliers. And we have, what you want to do is hit this magnifying glass on our main page for suppliers and then start typing the name that you want for a supplier. And I've picked up one. You start typing anything in and it'll bring up anything that has that type of information on it. And then if you know more, it'll bring in the whole thing. Then you can click on it, the name, and it'll pop up. It'll open up your supplier. Another way to do a search is by advanced. And from here, there's a couple of different types with supplier type, supplier full name, or if it's the beginning of the name, taxpayer ID, business classification, if you wanted to find a specific small business, lots of different options, but your main one is going to be this magnifying glass here on the right, and then you can find whatever type you need. And then it will also show you, this will pick up on any alternate names that a supplier might have, a DBA name. Right now it's going to be searching mostly the supplier name, but we'll also have alternate names. So it'll bring up the main record and show you the alternate name. So from here, we're going to go now to our other main topic, which is adding a supplier. And from here, it'll ping you open and ask you for your supplier. It has some loaded in, but it is not going to be from our database. It's just what they have built. So it'll bring up some and kind of fill out a little bit of information if you have it. It's not telling you if there's a duplicate in ours, but most of the time you're going to hit this can't find your company. And then you will start inputting information. It's going to require a company name, an organization type. So if we have an LLC, S corp or partnership, you can put that in there, or corporation. If it's an individual or sole proprietor, you can pick one of those. We're just going to go with LLC. Supplier type. It's not a required field, but it will help you to sort information. And then if all else fails, or if you're unsure, you can hit supplier. Corporate website, if you have it. Any attachments you want to attach, you can attach here. It's a couple of steps, but pretty easy. You hit the browse, you hit something, it attaches. You hit OK. Country, you can start typing, and then again, it'll bring up different types of countries. Once that is inputted, you can open up the taxpayer ID, or if it's foreign, you can put that in. And then you can enter the taxpayer ID number here. It's going to want contact information. This is going to be the supplier's contact information, not the department's. If you're filling it in for the department. So you want to make sure that you provide contact for the supplier so that they can have access, or we can request an account so they can update on their own. I'm going to hit next. It makes the contact information automatic. And then you can go to the next one. Adding an address here. I'm going to create an address. It's going to ask you for an address name. This could be whatever. We'll end up editing it out. But for our template purposes, it's going to be PUR1. You're going to put the name of the supplier, an address. And then if you have the zip code, you put that in first and it will fill in the rest for you. You want to check ordering and remit to for any purchase order type of supplier. Hit OK, put email. And then here is our main collection of information that we're going to need to finish the registration for a supplier. So it's going to ask, are you a UC department registering on behalf of the supplier? If you say no, it's going to say, okay, please enter the contact information and email address with whom you're working. So it's going to want the department contact person and their email. And then if it says, yes, you are the department, it's still going to ask you for your name and email address. Second question is, please state business purpose. We're looking for a couple of details here, and there's a couple of examples that have been provided. So if you know it's an independent contractor that you're adding, we want to know independent contractor, editing services or website design or whatever kind of little details you have, if it's a performer or rental, much the way we get little descriptions now, but some details. So we'll go with, I'll just copy and paste this one. Buying. Here's where you're going to attach the W-9 that you've collected. If it's an individual or a company for US base, and we'll do here, you'll be able to attach the W-9 so that we'll be able to review it right away.
And Dina, if I could, since you're on this section, there was a question in chat about foreign supplier onboarding process. So maybe if you could just speak briefly on the foreign choice here.
Okay. So if this were a foreign supplier, then the answers would apply for this. It's much the same process. The address format will be a little bit different for foreign addresses, but the way we have it now is if you're a foreign company, it's not a requirement because we don't, foreign company or foreign individual, it's not a requirement to have the tax ID. So this process here, if you were a foreign supplier, you would hit this. It's not going to require this attachment, but for a US one, it will. There's a couple of questions you'll see coming down on the rest of the application or questionnaire, where if you have, so if you have a W-8 for a supplier, it can be attached here, no problem. And then there's a question down below where if it's clear that you're probably going to need one, again, it's going to ask for it, and then it will be required based on those answers. But maybe next time, well, that'll be a topic for next. I'll demo a foreign one. So select one. Okay, so our number 4 question is select one from available payment terms. So we're going to have the supplier choose what payment term they preferred. From here, they will work on with our third party or in-house to get set up for them. It's not going to require any attachments, but they will reach out based on the information that is provided here. So if they are interested in ACH, they would check that, and then they'd have bottom line reach out to them. Are you a California certified small business? So if they are small business and they say yes, you have the option of attaching the, they're going to want to know what your California certificate is here. Then they will want to attach something showing that. And if they're not, then it's just a no. If you're performing services for the university, we're going to be collecting insurance. It will get updated to their record. And then once process goes through again, like before, the buyers will review for qualifications of it, but the information will be put in for them.
Hey, Dina, can I interrupt you? I'm sorry. You're doing a great job. We seem to have a few questions coming up through our chat about who's doing this. Is it the department? Is it the supplier? Would you like to touch on that, or would you like me to go over that real quick?
You can do it.
Okay. So the expectation is that the suppliers, they're going to be provided a link, and it's basically to invite the supplier to come on board and register themselves through this self-supporting portal through Oracle. Now, we're certainly not naive to think that there's going to be pushback from the supplier, from some suppliers not wanting to do this or not understanding what to do. One, we're going to have a sort of a guide that we're going to provide suppliers as to how to fill this out. A lot of this is really should be to the point, basic, but we understand that there would be questions. But two, if the supplier still insists on not doing this themselves, the department will be able to proxy in for the department and provide this information. That is our plan B. Ideally, we would get the supplier themselves to do this. And I don't want to sort of hijack the training here that Indina is providing, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood what our workflow process is. So why don't we go ahead, Indina, with your continued demonstration. And
actually,
maybe,
Vartan, if I could, just because I do see a couple hands up, and this is kind of a meaty topic. So
sure.
maybe we do sort of pause in the middle here and answer a couple of these questions that they have their hands up for.
Absolutely.
Olga, I'm assuming you were first because I think that's how Zoom does it.
Hi, yes, good question. So when we say any supplier, and I saw the description about the purpose, and I also said we're doing this for honorariums or fellowships. We normally don't handle W-9 forms when we enter those, but now it sounds like we would actually be filling those up or collecting those and then uploading them to the system if our department is processing that new vendor request or setup.
Well,
Do you want me
make
to?
sense?
You got it, Vartan?
yeah. So that is why we want the suppliers to go in themselves and to do this. Right? We do not want to ask for the W-9, but again, and I sort of use the analogy, break glass in case of emergency, where the department would need a proxy in.
In fact, I was about to send an email.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then we would need to process in the way that you had just described by getting that information into the portal. Hopefully that answers your question. I see Mary Carrillo.
Yeah. So a couple questions. So right now I know we can get the W-9 and we can upload it into, or we can send it to the vendor with their vendor ID number. They can upload it there. Is that going away? That link?
Indina?
Indina shaking her head.
Yes,
Okay.
that is going away.
Okay. And then my second question is, I see this part where you're filling out right now. Where in the process would we stop if you're having the vendors fill this out? Because we went from like that first page now to here, so I'm confused as where our information would stop.
Sure. So as Indina just scrolled up, you could see that's what we call the train, I think, right?
Okay.
And that would be step 4. So again, we would be providing information, sort of a training guide as to what each train stop what it's composed of and what needs to be filled out. And the questionnaire, it's probably the most essential part of this because we're getting a lot of the key information on onboarding the supplier through the questionnaire. But for company details, contacts, addresses, those are going to be, there's going to be some information required there as well.
Okay. So we can go through this whole thing without entering this, and then you guys will send a link to the vendor. No?
No,
No.
it is either or. It is a one-stop process. That's the link the department's going to be filling out,
Oh.
or it's going to be the supplier.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
And again, not to keep reiterating this, but if the supplier is able to do this on their own, they could always go back in the future as well, right? If they need to change information, they will have the ability to do so because they're registering on their own.
So if they don't want to do it, then we just go in here and guess?
No, there's less of a they don't want to. This is our onboarding solution at UC Davis starting
Right.
January.
Okay,
So
so
if
if
they
they don't
want
do
to
it,
do
then
business
they
with
don't
UC
get
Davis,
paid.
this is their onboarding tool. Yes.
Okay, so it's either you don't do it, you don't get paid. So
Yeah.
What we're trying to put in place is a possible solution for when you don't want to. And there are scenarios where perhaps like an honoraria, where it is slightly inappropriate to reach out to the person you're trying to provide an honorarium to and have them do a bunch of legwork so
Mhm,
that you can turn around and give them a gift.
right.
So
Okay.
that's what more this one, the department facing one is, that's where this is at.
Okay.
The vast majority of suppliers or payee relationships, the expectation should be that they are performing self-service to onboard.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Thank you.
But we want you to know what that looks like for them. That's very important, right? That
Right.
you see what they're interacting with.
Right.
And also it looks like, is it Agron?
Yes, thank you. Just put my question on the chat as well, but I think wasn't clearly understood. At the beginning of the presentation, I saw a watch list for vendors. I just want to understand if that watch list is used when the vendors don't perform the obligations under the contract, or is that watch list used for any other purpose within the system?
So you're speaking of when we're searching for a supplier?
No, it was a managed watch list at the beginning of the presentation. I got no access to that tile, so I'm unable to showcase. But if you go back at the beginning, then you can see right there that there is an option for the watch list. My understanding is that that watch list should be for risky vendors, that they cannot carry out the duties based on the contract, but I might be mistaken, so I'm raising that question.
I don't think that's what this is, Agron. I went back on that one. This is just a functionality related to searches. It looks like it's on every search in Oracle has a manage watch list button. The short answer is I don't know what it is. So we've asked and gone out to take a look, but it's mostly just related to searches. It would have nothing to do with a watch list for risky suppliers or things like that. It's just a functionality that exists in Oracle. We'll dig more into it, but not related maybe to what you're thinking of.
So
It's a good time to remind everybody that Oracle has a wide variety of functions and features and buttons and things that we don't always know what they do. We really do train on what you want to do, not all of the possible options out there. So you may stumble across things, and if it's not part of what we're directing you to do, our advice would be first not to do it.
Sounds good.
All right, in the interest of time, let's get Indiana back
Yeah,
on track
thank you.
and continue through the questionnaire.
Mhm. I think we stopped at the insurance, so I just went ahead and added it. If you do say yes, it's going to stop you, so you have to have that already. They have to have that for them to attach. Is your service entity incorporated in the state of California? If you say yes, it's going to require the tax form board 590 and it'll be attached here. If not, you hit no. Are you a foreign supplier performing services in the United States? If you say yes, here's where again we would attach the W-8. But if not, then no. Are you a current employee, former employee, or a near relative and an employee of any campus, medical center, and or lab of the University of California? This is the conflict of interest. If you have not, you just hit no. If you say yes, then you would attach the conflict of interest form. There's a link here for the supplier or the department to find the form, and that would be attached. And then a couple of new questions here that we've added since our last demo is, please provide an email address where the miscellaneous 1099 tax form would be sent, and this is if applicable. You would put the email address here. Please provide email addresses where purchase order are to be sent. Email address for the PO. And this is going to be added so that we can send the POs directly. So I'm gonna pick an info. All right. Once everything is filled out, you will hit next. And then if there's anything missing, it gives you this little message here. So then you can go back to something that is missing. And you can either hit here or you can hit that link below and then look for the star. No. No, it was the department. Again, you hit next, you review over what is attached and what has been presented, and then you hit register. Then it'll give you a confirmation for registering. And then once this will go to the supplier once the record has been approved. So there'll be communication out to the supplier if it's needed, if something is missing. And that's what I have for you today. Any more questions that we need to touch on?
And Dina, there's a couple that that I don't think we've addressed yet. And one, I'm not sure if you will know the answer to. Does this have to be done in one sitting, or can you save it and come back and work on it some more later?
I believe it has to be done in one sitting, but I don't know if that is because that's how it is in our testing environment. Usually there was an option for like there's a save for later.
Yeah, I've asked about that. And
But I don't think it's,
I've
I don't
asked
know
about
if it's
that.
part of the testing that's not functioning or so, yeah.
And it should be where someone saves and we'll be able to go back and do later. We just, that's how it's supposed to work. We just haven't finalized that yet. All right.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that's everything in the questions right now. Well, we can go ahead and move on to the next section. We have with us today Brian McElligott from Ag and Environmental Sciences. I know a lot of y'all are here today to learn about the online pre-purchasing and how that will interact with Oracle. He's going to be discussing that. And Matt Zarnowski, our SCM Procurement Solutions, is here as well and will be presenting on sorry, I'm a little scattered today, on reassign functionality that's related to the online catalog shopping. Brian?
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pre-purchasing today, and I'm going to start, for those who maybe have not used it, with some information about what pre-purchasing is and what it does. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, thank you. So pre-purchasing is a web-based system. It's a homegrown UC Davis application. It was built for submitting and managing financial transactions. It's used very widely across campus. We have about 11,000 active users, spanning across 2,600 work groups configured across campus. And it's primarily used for routing transactions to like a central business office type team or shared service organization, but it's also used in obtaining pre-approvals for transactions before they get entered into the actual financial system. So it's also meant to capture approvals of like your supervisor, a budget manager, a lab manager, or a PI on a grant before a transaction becomes an official financial transaction. It's also been used for much more than just purchasing things. It's used for routing all sorts of requests to your business office, like procurement card receipts, one-off accounts payable requests, even some accounts receivable and internal billing requests, travel and entertainment, and basically anything else you might want to route to your business office. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a demonstration of how pre-purchasing will integrate with Oracle with Aggie Enterprise for a relatively straightforward purchase type of transaction. And it starts with placing an order. We are going to choose a testing work group. And this is going to be, you're going to see that I'm going to put in different justifications in different areas, because we're going to see how these come through in Oracle in the requisition that we create through this integration. Okay, so the first thing you have to choose is a vendor. This queries the supplier database that Andina was just showing us. And so when you search for a vendor and choose a vendor here, you know that it's an active vendor in Aggie Enterprise. You can also enter a new vendor if you need to. If you do not have a vendor or supplier that's already active, you can sort of free form, let your business office know who they would like to work with. And then that'll dovetail into the vendor onboarding process before a requisition can begin. But for this sake, we're going to choose an active vendor, Holt. And then we're going to choose a shipping address. So we're going to ship this to me. And then this campus address integrates with the deliver to database that's in Oracle. So we're going to ship this item to one of our facilities, and you can see all the mail stop delivery codes that are in our database. And this one we're going to ship to the Russell Ranch office trailer. We have to name it. Okay, new address has been added. And then we fill out some line items. So today we're going to order a tractor repair part. And it's going to be about $3,000. In this little additional information box for each line item, it's still called commodity code, but it is actively integrated with the purchasing category values in the requisition section of Oracle in the module. So we're going to search for a purchasing category. So heavy equipment, machineries, and accessories looks about right. Okay, you can see here we have a tax that is only used for estimation purposes, and for routing approvals, this can be zeroed out. It doesn't have to be correct. We don't worry too much about tax in pre-purchasing because there's a tax engine within Oracle, within Aggie Enterprise, that will handle the absolute correct calculation of tax for us. So this is really kind of a display and estimation number for us. And then we get down to the accounting section, and here's where we have to select an account. You can also split by line if you want to add different accounts for either line item. You can turn on that functionality, and these account selection fields come up to every line item. But for the sake of this demonstration, we're just going to choose one account. There's two options for interacting with the new chart of accounts from pre-purchasing. One is that whoever manages your work group for your department can pre-configure chart strings or even PPM strings for users within the work group to use. And so you will see all the pre-configured account strings that have been set up with this work group available in the drop-down menu, or you can freeform create your own with a tool that we have for building chart strings and then setting them as your favorites. So in this case, though, we are just going to choose one of our pre-configured chart strings. And then we choose date needed. It usually has to be in the future, someday after today. And we can upload files if needed. I'm not going to do that for the purposes of this demonstration, but oftentimes with like exemptions to sales tax or capital asset information, there will have to be a file uploaded to go along with the requisition. Once this is created, it begins its routing in pre-purchasing. You can see that it tracks the review level every step of the way. So I'm going to serve all roles here. I'm going to approve as the workgroup account manager. I'm going to reload it. And approve as the approver. And now it's gotten to the purchaser level. And so in order to push this over to Oracle, a purchaser needs to make sure that all the information is complete, but we've already done that by making sure we selected a vendor, a valid supplier, that we selected a valid delivery address. And you can see here that they are green, meaning they validated against the data that's in Aggie Enterprise, and that we've selected a purchasing category. Once all that is complete, you choose the way you want to complete the order. Aggie Enterprise means it's going to push it through our integration with Aggie Enterprise and create a draft requisition in Oracle for the purchaser to then review, finalize, and submit. So we're going to complete that. And then I'm going to reload that same order. We can see at the top now, the order status is completed, but the Aggie Enterprise system details shows that this is still in process. It usually takes about 4 to 5 minutes for these requisitions to show up in Oracle. So I prepared one ahead of time. Within Oracle, you see, let me go back 1 second. Within Oracle, you see your most recent requisitions in this sort of like quick view panel here on the requisition section of the supply chain module. And the most recent ones will always appear at the top here, but you can always click Manage Requisitions. The default search criteria is all requisitions entered by whatever user has come into this section of the system. And so if you were the one who clicked Submit in pre-purchasing, then this requisition will import in your name. And so it will show up here as the most recent one that you've created. And so you can see here that in the description / business purpose field of the requisition, there's a combination of several things, of 3 things that came over from pre-purchasing. The first is the pre-purchasing request number, this number right here. The second is what we entered in the justification field, this first justification field right here. And then the third is whatever was entered in the business purpose field, which was right down here. So all 3 of those get added together in that priority order. If there's too much text to come through, because pre-purchasing allows you to write an essay in some of those fields if you want. If there's too much information, it'll just get cut off whenever it reaches the character limit in Oracle. We can also see that our supplier has come through from pre-purchasing. Our delivery location has come through for pre-purchasing. The line item description, the quantity, the pricing that we entered in pre-purchasing, and the purchasing category, or what we know of as today as commodity code, have all come through. The chart of accounts has also come through. And this will work with both GL and PPM strings that are entered in pre-purchasing. The first thing you have to do here is action edit to sort of activate the draft requisition. And then each line item from pre-purchasing will show here as a separate line item. This is a straightforward, just single line item. You can then come down here and update the billing if needed. If you need to mark it as non-taxable, if you have a trade-in, if you need to apply for the R&D exemption, you can check all those boxes when you get to Oracle. You can add notes, you can add attachments. If you have quotes, scopes of work, other things like that, you would bring them over manually from pre-purchasing. And then basically you're good to go. You can calculate so that Oracle's tax engine, as I mentioned, calculates the correct amount of sales tax. Another thing I want to mention is that delivery addresses. Oracle allows for one-time delivery addresses, but those have to be entered manually. The integration between pre-purchasing and Oracle doesn't allow us to bring over free-form addresses, only addresses that already exist in the database. So if you have a one-time address that needs to ship somewhere off campus, not affiliated with any university facility, then you would need to come in here into the Oracle interface, choose one-time address, and then fill out your one-time address. All right, after that, you are good to submit, and off the requisition will go into routing just like any other requisition. All right.
All right, so should we pause there for a moment? Does anyone have any questions for Brian?
Yeah.
I noticed one about the justification. Is that a term from OPP, or did I miss a field in Oracle?
Justification is a term from OPP. It's
Okay.
the first field that we filled out, and pre-purchasing sort of has two different business purpose fields. It's got the justification, and then it's what it's called a business purpose. The justification is required, so that comes first. The business purpose is technically optional in OPP, but they sort of serve different functions and different purposes based on how different departments use the system.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
So I did just, disclaimer, which we didn't have up front, but I threw in chat. So this is not a requirement of Oracle. This is a boundary application. It is frankly a pretty useful tool for departments to gather information from their end users and potentially route it internally for reviews or clarifications. And then ultimately, as you just saw, another way to get the data into an Oracle requisition. The Oracle requisition is ultimately the financial system of record for the rec, and that's where approvals would happen officially and so on and so forth. But another one of our great tools that we were able to fortunately to get plugged into this system so that we can have this alternative method of getting data in.
Brian, one quick question that might get buried because it's up there a little bit. Will the OPP request automatically complete once the item is marked delivered, or will we still have to manually close them out? Hopefully that makes sense. I'm just reading it over.
Actually, the pre-purchasing request is marked complete as soon as you send the requisition to Oracle. So there's different ways to complete a request in pre-purchasing. You can either complete it because you want it to turn into a requisition in Oracle, or you can complete it without creating a requisition in Oracle. As I mentioned, people use this boundary system for a lot more than just formal requisition purchasing. So people may want to mark orders as complete without ever creating a requisition because they do not need to or plan to create a requisition. But the status of the OPP request is in its final state, is in complete status when the Oracle, when the requisition has been submitted and created in Oracle.
And then there were a couple more questions that are specific for you can probably answer. One was, will the approvers remain the same as they are now in OPP? I
Yes.
suspect yes.
Yes, so we will not have to reconfigure or start our work groups from square zero, essentially. All your work groups that exist today will carry forward into the new version of the system that is available on January 1st. Some maintenance or sort of like housekeeping may need to be done to add in the new chart strings if a department wants to set up new chart of account strings or new PPM strings for their work group, but all your approvers will be there. So whoever the account manager is in OPP or the approver is, they will still be in that role when the system goes live on January 1st.
All right, excellent. I think you answered the second one here roughly, which was Joe asking if the administrators need to add chart of accounts to work groups. Will that have to be done individually? So it sounds like new ones, yes.
Yes, we actually have a pretty nice feature in the work group configuration settings. I don't want to get too far into it. It might take a little bit too long, more than I have time for. There will be a tool called KFS Account Convert, where your KFS accounts that are associated with your work group today, the system will attempt to auto convert them based on mapping data that we are all giving to campus into chart strings, but that won't be perfect. So it'll still be important for work group administrators to go through and at least look at what those conversions look like and either accept them or add a new replacement chart string manually.
Good. And then another question here, can you turn a requisition, are you able to turn it into a requisition without completing it? I'm not sure what the purpose behind that would be, but I think no.
No, that is the same step in the workflow. It's the complete button that sends the requisition to the official financial system of record, which is the same process we use today with Kuali. So you click complete, the requisition goes to Kuali.
Okay. And then it says, Laura's got a question. Will the line item receiving still be needed to pay an invoice? And is the option in OPP to mark items as received be linked to something in Oracle? Okay, so on the Oracle side, receiving is no longer a component of our invoicing process. And I don't believe you are feeding anything into Oracle on receiving data. So
we are not.
No to both. Okay, I'm going to let Brian go because I know he's got a lot of super user testing to sign off for CAES. Poking there.
Appreciate the reminder.
And I think we're going to hand it over to Matt. He's going to show us some stuff. Is that correct?
That's
Thanks,
correct. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Zarnowski. I'm the Procurement Solutions Product Manager here at SCM and the current Aggie Buy Administrator. And I can tell you as the Aggie Buy Administrator, I know how much people on this campus love their window shopper functionality. And unfortunately, I'm not here today to tell you that we've got it in Oracle. We do not. It's not going to be here. But what I am going to show you is some way to manage your carts and assign some carts that will allow you to mimic the workflow of window shoppers without the restrictions. We don't have those restrictions in place, but we can still do the workflow and manage people's expectations. So let's take a look at what we have. Okay. So here I am in Oracle looking at my purchase requisitions screen. I've got all my recent requisitions here. And the first thing I do want to point out is that while by default, if you're just using things, it looks like you have a single cart in Oracle, you actually have the ability to have multiple, what we would call in Aggie Buy, saved carts or multiple carts in process. They just end up being called something different here in Oracle. They're going to be called incomplete requisitions. So if I'm currently working on this requisition, I've got some lab stuff that I'm buying, and I've got this put together. If I just go in here and I hit save, which is what you normally do, right? And then you want to go back and you want to add some more things and you hit shop. Well, you can see I've got two things in my cart. So anything I do now is going to be adding items to that cart. And so I will just continue adding to this cart. Eventually I'll submit this cart and it will go into workflow. Well, if that's not my goal, if I want to set this cart aside and I want to clear out what's in my cart and start from scratch so I can work on a different project, what I can do is I can, while I'm reviewing my cart here, and because this is I already saved this, I now have to take a different action on it, right? So, oh, I'm already in shop. So the other option is I can go into here, instead of hitting save, you can do save and close. And if I click on save and close here, what it does is it puts it in here. We've got it as an incomplete requisition sitting in my recent requisitions, and you can see my cart is now empty. So now I can move on to another project, whether that project is starting to shop from scratch, going to some catalogs and adding things into it, or if I want to say, oh, now I'm ready to work on this other incomplete requisition over here. So I can then go into this requisition that's incomplete, and then to make sure I bring it back into my current active cart, what you would want to do is go into the actions button and click on edit. And as soon as I do that, it brings those items into my active cart. I can click shop again. I can add things to here. I can edit what's in my cart before I take it on and send it off into workflow. Or if I save this, oh, you wouldn't believe I went through this earlier, would you? So let's open this up, actions, there we go. And instead of editing it, what I want to do, so if I have this as an incomplete requisition, I open the incomplete requisition, go to the actions button, and this is the point where you can see reassign here. So this is one of the actions you can take on one of these. We can call them carts, we can call them incomplete requisitions, but one of the actions you can take is reassign. So in the current Windows Shopper workflow, somebody would build a cart, they would assign it to a requisitioner, the requisitioner would be able to submit it. Now in Oracle, anyone who can build a cart is going to be able to submit it, but we can still design workflows. Department can design action workflows where you tell certain people, hey, don't submit your carts. You still need to assign them to the same people you've always been assigning them to. So they can take their cart here, they can click on the reassign button, and then you can go ahead and assign this to somebody else who's going to submit it for them. Because you don't want, let's say the department doesn't want everybody submitting cards. So they go in here, you can select who you want it to. Oh, now I've reassigned this requisition off to a different requester. Now they'll get a notification and they can take action on it. So there's some quick tips on using cart functionality and reassigning carts within Oracle. I hope people find that helpful, and I'm hoping us getting us back on track time-wise here by being fast.
Pause there. Folks have any questions about this potential path? Just another tool in the tool chest. And if there was one, kind of looks like it's embedded in another thread, but could this save and close work in place of IT staff creating quotes for purchase? Might need a little more context on that question.
Okay. We have IT staff where they'll actually, they'll build the computers with the, the information that they need that, purchasers don't have, and they'll create a quote with certain vendors in Aggie Buy. And then they provide a quote, and then we go ahead and place that order through that quote. So since they're not going to be able to be shoppers, we could give them access then, and they could save and close a requisition. And then we can order it based off on that, is because they have to build the computers. You don't just buy them off the shelf that way. And we can't do that as purchasers because we're not IT.
I believe that is an option, sort of how you described.
Yeah.
Also, they could just submit it. It's another option.
That's my thought. Wouldn't it be easier at that point to have that IT staff submit the requisition at that time?
I think easier, yes. It
Okay.
would be a shift in how your department manages that workflow,
But yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that everybody else agrees. Okay, thank you very much.
Uh,
I don't believe you can you can't recall a cart you've reassigned, but you can ask them to give it back to you.
yes,
I think
you
you
have to
can
ask
go in.
nicely.
It's not recall, but I think you can assign a cart to yourself, which is not the same thing.
Yeah, I was just looking at it actually, Matt, to make sure that I was giving the right answer. You can search for that old rec and then you can reassign it to yourself. Like you
Right.
said, there's no recall, but you can go out, find that rec that is now under somebody else's name and take it from them.
Okay, any further questions on the reassigning? All right, we're all blown away by the OPP stuff, so everyone's shocked. Great, why don't we shift gears then, and we'll take a look at some of the AP and then payment inquiries. And I think we've got, Marina, you teeing us up for that?
Yes, I will
Lovely.
get into that. Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to go through and show you how to search for invoices. So you'll go to your dashboard, go to invoices.
Make sure you're sharing first, sorry.
Oh, shoot. Thank you. Something felt off. Okay, we're good. Just start over. Okay, so go into invoices. Go over to your taskbar over here on the right. Click on the little paper document. Go to manage invoices. And then you'll see this header pop up. It's got a bunch of fields. Quick note is that any field with the 2 stars next to it is required. You don't have to fill out all the fields with the 2 stars, but at least one of them needs to be filled out in order to return your search results. So I will go ahead and pull up an invoice. Search, and you'll see that some of the basic information just pulls up. You have your invoice number, the date, supplier, amount, etc., all of that. Anything that's highlighted, blue, they're hyperlinks, so go ahead and click those when possible. So on this page, there's a couple of actions up here, like the paperclip if you want to see the attachment. Otherwise, you could just go ahead and click on the invoice number and it will open it up with more information. And then the attachment is over here as well. So you could click it here if you wanted to. And then on this page, you're able to see, the invoice date, the supplier. If you go down here, you'll see the lines so you can see what it was paid against. The holds and approvals tab, you can see who initiated it, what step it's at, if it's been approved and all of that. Payments, this hasn't yet gone out for payment, so that information would be here. And so it's basically pretty simple how to find an invoice, and I will go ahead and show you the advanced version. Go back to your taskbar and manage invoices. And up here, if you click advanced, you get a lot more fields. You get, all this extra stuff if you need to search with more criteria. So, also I wanted to point out, there's this button here, add fields. So you can add all these extra fields if you need to search, by these items rather than what it already gives you. Most of the time you will be searching by invoice number. That's the easiest way. You should know the invoice number. If you do put an invoice number and there's duplicate invoice numbers from other departments, that might happen. You should still be able to find your invoice pretty easily because you'll know the amount, you'll know the supplier, things like that. But let's go ahead and just do the advance, and I'm going to go ahead and add purchase order. So go ahead and put the invoice again because that's one of the required fields. And then I'll put in the purchase order, which is if that's, if you need to search by that way. So go ahead and hit search again. And the same thing pops up. You have your basic info, you can click into it, find what you need. And that's pretty much it. Just a reminder that come January, invoicing will be 100% centralized. So you'll just continue sending your invoices to invoicing@ucdavis.edu. And that's all I have. If anyone has any other questions?
Oh, Marina, will you address, you can tell when an invoice is paid by when you click on the payments and the payment information will show there. That'll be picked up next. However, you can also search your invoice number in queue. If you submit your invoice, but it hasn't been processed yet, it's still in the queue to be processed. Marina, will you show that? So they'll show the ones that are incomplete that have been submitted into the system but haven't been processed yet.
Sure. So if I go ahead and look up an invoice. It'll pull up and you'll see the validation, the status over here. It says incomplete. If you click into the invoice. It pulls up something a little different because there's no there hasn't been any work done on it, so it's not going to have the action. So that's another way to check and see if your invoice is where it is in the process. Any other questions?
I think we've handled a couple of them there in chat. Give it just a moment, though. I know people tend to trickle in with some questions about invoicing. Okay, so that's the general way. Look up an invoice, see what the status of it is. We'll switch gears and take a look at the payment stuff now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Clark, and I am the accounts payables disbursements lead in supply chain management. I have a couple individuals that I work with. Their names are Kim Fine and Pao Zong. And we are responsible primarily for printing and mailing checks out to vendors on a daily basis, reissuing any kind of lost checks, canceling payments that were issued in error, whether it's duplicate or no longer needed, something like that. And then overall, we'll research any kind of payment questions that come up. Today, I'm going to show you, I'm going to demonstrate how to look up a couple different payments in Oracle. So just give me a second to get that started. So I'm logging into Oracle. Go to my home page. And this is my dashboards, primarily for payments. You could get to payments by going through invoices, but primarily if you want to look up a particular vendor to see what we've paid them historically, you're going to go into the payments icon. And then on the right-hand side, the task icon. And then from the list, you're going to select manage payments. And I think the first thing I'm just going to show you is like a single payment that we've issued to a supplier. So we'll go to this supplier. You have to click on search on the right-hand side here. You cannot press enter. It just makes you click on it. Similar to the invoicing screens, you're going to get this a list of payments for this vendor. This particular vendor only has the one payment, but it's going to show you the payment number. The payment document will, right here it says Wells Fargo check. It will either be that, ACH, Payment Plus, all of our different payment methods, depending on, you know, how the vendor is set up. The status of the check or the payment, it's going to be negotiable. It could be void if we voided it out. Or it will be reconciled. And reconciled means that the vendor has deposited the check and it's cleared our university bank account. Negotiable means it has not yet cleared the bank. So it's en route to the vendor. it will show the payee name and the dollar amount that we paid. You can drill down and get additional information. It's going to show you the same information up top, but you might want to look and see where was this payment sent. You're going to find that information under the payment details tab. You'll see the remit to address. And if you want to also look at what invoices were paid for this particular payment, you can click on that and it'll show you the one invoice we have. If it had multiple invoices, it would be listed here. And I'm going to show you a little later on one that has multiple invoices, but for now, you can open this up and it will take you to the invoice details. It'll have a lot of the same information up top, and then it'll have a little bit additional information under the like the tax line. And then down here, it just kind of shows you what this is, what invoicing sees. So once you've looked at that and you're done with it, you can just say, okay. And then you can just click on done. And let's see, we've done again, sorry. Gonna get back to the regular. So now I'm gonna show you a payment that has multiple invoices. And this one is BWR funding. Again, you have to click on the search right-hand side of the screen. And they have multiple invoices listed, but let's say you're just looking for one particular, or you're just looking for a particular check. So this invoice right here, if you open it up, you're going to see a lot of the same information, vendor name, negotiable, the amount. But down here, you're going to see that there were multiple invoices that were paid. So if you wanted to just look at, let's say, this $1,085 invoice that was paid, you can do the same thing, pull up the information. It's going to bring up all the details about the invoicing, tax, and all that good stuff. There could be, we group all our payments. So if an invoice has, a vendor has like 10 invoices that are paid in one day, they will all be grouped together in one check. So you will see the 10 invoices listed under this one check. And then the other thing I wanted to show you is a different payment type. So let me go back. Again, tasks, manage payments. It gets repetitive. Let's see, we're gonna go to Cisco. I'm gonna do a search. And you can see we had Cisco. We had them on ACH, and then we changed them to check. Most people go the other way. But for this purposes for this demonstration, I just want to show you that the payment document is now ACH. You see the Wells Fargo check, but we also have the Payment Plus and Pay Mode X payment types. So you want to just, be familiar with that. Additionally, under the payment status, you'll see we have a voided item. And I just want to show you what that kind of looks like. I don't have a example of one that has been paid because we haven't processed any check files yet. But in any case, this is where you're going to go and find the information. And again, you just always need to drill down and get more information, whatever information you're looking for. Remember, there's all these tabs down here. Payment details and payment invoices are primarily the tabs we're going to use when searching for payments. And I think that's about it. You can also go into the invoice itself and drill down to the payment information. And maybe we can do a demonstration on that next go around, but that's always an option. And then we are going to be probably in the future going over the special handling. A lot of folks do the special handling. They need a check delivered somewhere other than to the vendor directly. So we will have more information on that down the road as we move along here. And I think that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
I see there's a question from Yulia asking if ACH is available for all vendors.
Yes, it is. Always.
Susan had a broader response than I did. I said sort of, kind of.
You said kind of. Well, we do have our preferred payment methods. And we kind of have them in, we like vendors to entertain looking at our Payment Plus solution. That's a really great solution. If that doesn't appeal to them, they could go to ACH. And then, for those vendors who do not want to accept either one of those, they can always get a paper check. So, yeah, so we have our preferred payment terms that everybody should probably, become familiar with. So when you're setting up vendors, you can offer them the options that they would like. Yeah,
I put a link there in the chat of how to look up those different payment methods.
Wonderful. Thank you, Crystal.
And that's always an evolving science for UC Davis and for the UC system at large. But
yeah,
in general, ACH is a very efficient payment method, but it is also high risk to the institution for fraud. So it's one that we don't necessarily hand out like candy.
Right.
And just my normal disclaimer for anybody that knows me, we just hate paper checks. So
I know.
if we could avoid those, we really try.
And nowadays we have these electronic options. And so most vendors are able to, pick one of these electronic options, and it just makes it a lot more, it's safer. We're not having to manually reissue checks. I mean, we're a huge university. We reissue a lot of payments. So there's a lot of manual processes that happen behind the scene when having to reissue checks. So yeah, we definitely encourage one of our electronic methods.
Is there truly a 60-day waiting period for a check to be issued? Or is that just, no?
Nope.
So there's no waiting period.
No, I mean,
there's no such thing as a waiting period.
Yeah,
that's not a thing in AP. There is a payment terms that are based upon the various suppliers and the options they pick. One of which might include a net 60.
Oh, true. Yeah. So that's probably what she's asking. Yeah. So if the vendor is on payment terms as net 60, the payment will not be issued until 60 days from the invoice date. And then it'll be extracted, and whatever payment method they have set up under their vendor record is how the payment will go out at that time.
And a couple more questions on that. Mary's asking if the payment option is asked when entering vendor information. I do believe it is. Yes.
I believe so.
Yep.
Yes.
And then this might be a question for Vartan is, do vendors incur charges with any of those payment options?
We don't charge anything. We don't charge anything. Our bank doesn't charge anything. When we do set up suppliers on a credit card method of payment, there's an interchange fee. It's a standard industry-wide interchange fee that Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they charge. And that's usually roughly anywhere between 2 and 2.5%. But that's just the nature of doing business when you're getting paid immediately on a credit card. So again, we don't charge fees, and neither does our bank. Hopefully that answers that.
And then Tiffany, I think I want to point a clarification. There is no plan to integrate the student database of students into Oracle. So if we are planning to make a payment to a student, they are treated as a payee or supplier in Oracle. This is different than Koali. Koali has access to all the students. Oracle will not.
So I know
Oh,
we have
sorry,
some time left for some other questions. Can I just take a quick moment to plug two things before we get to more questions? The first is that if you've been to these before, we do have a survey that we put together about the modules that you saw today and how you feel they will meet your business needs. And also if there's any other things that you would like to see demonstrated at future demos. So I'm dropping that link into the chat. It's just a real short, I don't think it's even more than 10 questions, basically just asking you about what you think about what you saw today, what you think about the different modules. And then the other thing I just wanted to point out is my colleague, Jim Hewlett, has done a really good job of sort of outlining as we go along and learn more things about the impacts to, thanks, Jim, to SCM processes, supply chain management, procure to pay processes, of getting those up on our webpage so that you all can take some time and look over that. So we both enthusiastically put that in the chat there for you to take a look. So thank you for that.
All right, so we do have a few minutes left. It is sort of an open Q&A. If anyone has any questions that did not get addressed, now is your opportunity to lob them over the fence at us. And anything that we didn't answer appropriately, oh well, last chance to remind us. But we'll be back here again next month doing the same thing.
Hey, Mike.
Fire away, Tiffany.
So I just had a follow-up question to you in chat. So it sounds like in order for them to be paid electronically, they have to be a supplier. But they can still get a paper check though if they're not a supplier.
That is correct. So certain payment methods we will allow basically the same that we have today with the refund payment type, where we can type in a payee's information without having to register them. That'll be pretty much exclusive for things like students and refunds of income being returned back. But certainly if we wanted to leverage any of the more robust payment methods like a ACH transaction or anything like that, that would certainly require them to be set up as their own supplier.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. Good question. We haven't really addressed the student side of that. Same, by the way, for employees. So anything that's not happening through our Aggie expense system, if you're making a payment directly through the old school AP payments, the employee databases are not in there either. So you're not able to just pay an employee. You have to set them up. All right. Well, we never want to keep anyone longer than we have to. So again, thanks everybody for coming out. There's some last links there thrown up, reminders that we are working on the training. Our next demo will be July 27th. So hopefully you all can get out of here and finish up fiscal close and then take a little break and come back and join us in a month. Please do the survey. Most importantly from the survey, if you could just let us know if there's something that you want to see. That really helps us guide and frame what we show next month and the following month. So thank you, everybody. We're all in it together. We'll get there to the end. It's going to be fun. Be a nice January. So see you all there.